So, Wiley, the floor's yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for having me. Thank you to Creative Mornings. I have never given a presentation so early in the morning. I was so nervous about this, my body clock woke me up at 4 a.m. But it was actually kind of wonderful. I got to have my coffee and do my stretches, take a shot. Um, I'm kidding, totally kidding. I don't stretch. Um, but yeah, so it's like midday for me, so I'm ready to go. Thank you all for coming this early, and I'm so happy to see so many of you. As I was preparing this presentation, I kind of dismissed the theme for a minute and really just tried to focus on, my work and just have something to start on. So I got all my favorite murals I've done and photos of those and put them in this keynote, and then I started to kind of rehearse how I would go about talking about them. And I put up the first slide, and it was a mural, and then I stood up in my kitchen by myself, and I started to rehearse, and I said, so this is a mural that I painted, and it's paint on a wall that was painted by me. Click. This is another mural. And I realized, what do I say about all of these things? I typically just paint, and then I walk away. And then I thought of that phrase, the art speaks for itself. And what a cop-out that is. There was some artist somewhere that didn't want to do any public speaking, and somebody said, we need you to talk about this, and they thought of something so profound. They said, the art speaks for itself, and then, they walked away. And no artist ever has spoken about their art until now. So, okay, when it came to talking about my art, I looked at the theme, folklore. And I was like, okay, folklore. What do I know about folklore? I know Taylor Swift's album. What else? I consulted with Merriam-Webster, and they said that folklore is the oral tradition of passing down stories and telling stories from generation to generation. And I thought, I don't do that. I don't do that. So I had to keep thinking about how I can relate my art to folklore. So I broke down folklore a little bit more, and I thought, folklore is just storytelling. And what is painting if not storytelling? It is the visual representation of telling a story that's really prevalent in children's books. You get a beginning, middle, and end all told through illustrations. But I think the same thing can be said for a single image or a single canvas or a single mural. I think that's really relevant here in these two murals, which are out back and over on Upper Street, because these are literally based off of actual folklores, fables, and old stories. Harvey's Bar, based off of the Irish folklore of the rabbit that appears when you're too drunk. If you've seen the Jimmy Stewart movie, you know how horrifying that rabbit is. Another thing, somebody didn't want somebody to drink. They said, if you get too drunk, a terrifying life-size rabbit will show up. But still, that story stemmed this creation of the mural that became the Grove, and it encompasses all of the businesses and the collective of the Grove. And the same for the fable. Fable, Wine and Charcuterie, is based off of one of Aesop's fables about the crow who has a piece of cheese in its mouth, and the fox tricks the crow into dropping the cheese, and it can steal the cheese. So this is the last time that these murals will be so relatable to folklore. You think you're here about a creative talk about art, but really the true creativity is how I relate folklore to the rest of these murals. So let's get going. Okay, so murals tell a story. This is one of my very first murals I did. This is the before, by the way. This is one of the very first ones I did as a professional freelance mural artist. And the people who bought this house, they came to me and they said, the previous owners of this house have built this monstrosity of a structure in their backyard. And the purpose of this concrete thing was so that the husband could drive his golf cart in and out of the basement. Which it's even funnier because they're not on a golf course or a farm, it's just land. And his, number one hobby was, I guess, just driving this golf cart around. And they said, we don't drive a golf cart. This is just a huge structure here now that we have bought this house. We don't know what to do with it. We thought about knocking it down. It doesn't represent us. It doesn't, we don't want it part of our story, part of our folklore. It's like when they say the title of a movie in the movie. So I said, okay, let's brainstorm. How can we make this more representative of you? So we came up with some ideas. How can we make this magical, more fun, a place you want to be? How can we contribute to the atmosphere of this house? So what became of it was all these stone and ivy. We painted just these like sandy stones everywhere and these swirling gray stones on the ground and lots of ivy and moss hanging down. And this was a lot more representative of what they wanted. One of the people who lives here, he was an actor, he was very poetic, and he was so intelligent with how he spoke. He cared so much about words, but he didn't know how to visualize. So it was a really interesting collaboration to hear his story and hear like what he thought he wanted, but he didn't know how to see it, but he knew how to say it, and I could bring those words to a visual point. So that's one way a mural can tell your own story and represent who you are. So, and there's some more photos, some more details of it. It's really long. This took about a month long to do. But yeah, quite a transformation. Okay. So a lot of times murals are inspired by stories. This is a wall in my old apartment. Yeah, crazy. It's a wall. And when I was moving out of this apartment, long story short, I was having issues with property management, couldn't get a lot of things fixed, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I'll head on out of here because the building was sold. And I was in this weird limbo state where I didn't have a lease. So I was like, okay, cool, no rules. And because I didn't love the property management, I was like, okay, I'll just stick it to the man. I'll paint these walls, build my portfolio, and leave. And I did. But what was really intimidating was was one of the first projects where I had this huge blank wall that was not influenced by anybody else. No client, this was just for me. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what kind of story I wanted to tell. So I went to look for inspiration. And I couldn't figure anything out. So I said, I'll just put on my favorite movie, see if I can get some creative juices flowing. So I put on my favorite movie, which is The Devil Wears Prada, if you've ever seen it. And there's this really awesome monologue in that movie where Anne Hathaway plays a character who knows nothing about fashion but gets involved in the fashion industry, and she shows up to this meeting where Meryl Streep is curating all these clothings and designs, and this assistant holds up these two belts and they're identical, and Anne Hathaway laughs because like, what is the decision here? They're the same belt. And Meryl Streep goes into a 2 or 3 minute long monologue about how the sweater Anne Hathaway is wearing is chosen for her. It's the color cerulean. And I love this monologue because it gets so deep and so specific about the color cerulean and how it's chosen for her. And it's also just a really badass monologue. So I was like, okay, I think cerulean is my inspiration here. So what I did was I painted these cerulean roses. I thought roses kind of really represented this color the best. You kind of get the shading and the top layer of that cerulean. I got this sign. Matthew, my boyfriend here, got this sign for me and made this wall. And then I moved out and left. I don't know what happened to this wall. Could still be there. They could have painted over it. But what was really cool is I kind of consider this to be like my origin as an artist and where I really started to develop my style. I posted a video of this process, and on TikTok it got 6 million views, which was crazy validating because it wasn't influenced by anyone but my own taste and what I love. So a lot of my style kind of originated here, and it was all from one of my favorite stories, the movie The Devil Wears Prada. You know your favorite folklore, The Devil Wears Prada. Someone should keep a tally of how many times I relate something to folklore. Okay, so I don't just paint murals. I paint clothing. This is a suit I painted for a wedding. And what's funny is I was a +1 to this wedding. And the wedding attire was black tie creative. There was no other description, just black tie creative. And a lot of people didn't know what to do with that or what it meant exactly. But I knew exactly what to do. I went and bought this black suit. And I knew I wanted to make some sort of statement entrance. I knew I was going to paint the suit. but I didn't know what exactly. So I went to another story, the movie Ever After with Drew Barrymore. Yeah. Well, I was like, I love wings, and I love that entrance scene where she's got the big fairy wings, and everyone turns around and looks at her, and she's gorgeous. And so I was like, okay, I'll do some wings. Maybe not fairy wings. I'm already a fairy, but um, maybe something cooler. Maybe something a little more bad boy. You know, all those bad boys that paint their suits. Um, so, so I was like, I'll do this red wing, kind of like maybe almost like a little bit hinting at like a devil or something. So I did that. Showed up at the wedding as a +1. I was like, this is my hand painted suit. Stole the show. Posted another video on TikTok. Almost 6 million views again. And this was my second time making something that went so viral that was just from my own inspiration, just something I was passionate about. And all it came from Ever After, which is based on Cinderella, which I'm pretty sure is a folklore. So that really does relate. Okay. Okay. Using murals to tell the story of your brand. So I do more than just passion projects. I create murals for companies and businesses. And what I love about this is I get to collaborate with lots of people. So on the right, we have Crank and Boom. Crank and Boom has a really clear and concise branding. They love this specific color of purple, and a lot of their branding includes almost like clip art of ice cream and flavors and ingredients. And when they came to me about wanting to do a mural on their Manchester building, they said, we don't really know what we want, so if you could just start somewhere and just see. So it's like, okay, cool. So I designed this crazy design that had animals and fruits and colors, and it was ridiculous. And I sent that over, and they said, we love it, but it has nothing to do with us. This doesn't tell the story of Crank and Boom. I was like, okay, cool. This only tells the story of Wylie Caudill. Great. But it did give us a place to jump off of. So we're like, okay, we like the colors here. Maybe we could do this and this. And so eventually we got to, representing all the flavors they have at Crank and Boom and all of their ingredients. But I didn't have to give up my own style completely. We got to share a story together. I got to be, a chapter in their story. So, we've got my colorful stripes, which you see a lot in my pieces. And you get these kind of harsh black lines, like Illustrator style, which is very me. But then you have the Crank and Boom ice cream and flavors. So it gets to be a part of their story and mine. But this one on the left, the horse on High Knoll, was kind of the opposite. They are a fairly new business, and we're just starting an Airbnb on the top floor and a wealth advisory on the first floor. And they didn't know what they wanted at all. They're like, maybe something Kentucky themed, something interactive. I was like, okay. And then they thought of, we'd like to do a horse potentially. I was like, okay, if we do a horse, it's got to be a Wylie Caudill horse. It can't be, your typical thoroughbred in a horse field. So I sent them this pink horse covered in monstera leaves. And they were like, we love it. I was like, okay, cool, which I didn't expect. This was first draft. I was like, great, let's do it. And they said, we just want to put it in this little corner, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet. I said, oh, okay. What if we do the whole wall? And they're like, really? Can we do that? I'm like, yeah, let's do the whole wall. So we did the whole wall, and now it's become this huge part of their branding. They've named it called the Horse on High Knoll. It's on all of their social media. It's how they tell people, where the building is and where their business is and where the Airbnb is. It's the big pink horse building, the Horse on High Knoll. And now it's a huge part of their story, and it kind of launched a lot of their branding. Next. Okay. Using murals to tell the story of you. Okay. So I quite often work with Miss Isabel Ladd over here, who you gave the last Creative Mornings talk, didn't you? Yeah. So Isabel and I have a lot of fun together. Give it up for Isabel. Okay, back to me. So Isabel had a client that wanted a mural in the kids' playroom, and they wanted it to be representative of who they are. And Isabel found this awesome wallpaper of New York City in these crazy, colorful buildings and New York City icons. And she was like, if we bring Wylie in, we can rearrange the New York City icons, take them out, erase them, put in Lexington icons and icons of your own life. So we had a meeting with the client, and we came up with a very long list of all the things that they love to do. We have, in this mural, we have places where they like to eat, places where they like to go. We have Kentucky things like bourbon and horses and basketball. We have the names of their kids, and then we have their pets hidden throughout. There's tons of hidden gems in here. My favorite thing about this mural is the client wanted some girls doing yoga in the park, but she said, can we have one of them topless and drunk on wine? And if you look here, there's a naked lady drinking some wine, doing some yoga. Me on a Friday night. So that's how murals can represent you and tell your own story or your own folklore. Okay, cool. So this is kind of the last bit of my presentation. I want to build a mural with you guys. So I'm actually killing two birds with one stone here. This is an actual client that I'm getting ready to design for. So I'm going to pass these out now, but this will be a thing we'll do at the very end here. So there's about 50 or so of these. If you have to run out after this speech, I would maybe not take one, but if you have a couple seconds after I'm done, grab one of these and I'll explain what they do later. So I'll just start passing these out. Okay. So I had a client, and they're moving to a new building, and their branding was, their story was that they their company was named by their daughter, and their daughter loved bears, so she put the word bear in the name of this company. And they said, we really want this mural to represent our daughter, sort of, or just have a young girl, maybe represent any young girl and a bear. Make it whimsical, make it kind of folklore-ish. And so what I said, speak no more. I will start sketching. I love that idea. So what I like to do when I design a mural is I just like take that first idea I have, like the bear. Okay, how do I want the bear to be positioned? I do a really loose sketch of how I want it positioned. This first one, he looked too much like a cat, so I didn't like that one. So I was like, let's have him a little more stoic, standing up. And I was like, I like that a lot. Maybe he should be framed off by some branches, something in the forest. And then I was like, maybe we need some more levels. So what if we have the girl riding the bear, like she's queen of the forest, something really whimsical like that. So I like that idea. So I get on my iPad, start blocking in a few colors. They're working with a lot of grays and golds, and I like that combination. So I made the colors minimal because the idea was so whimsical and so bold that I think minimizing the use of colors makes it a little more mature too. So then I'm playing around with different ideas, using the branches maybe, framing off the girl a little more, making the story, making the folklore about them and less about the tree or the forest. I was like, maybe the leaves, there's too much fluff, so we'll just highlight the tree, make it a little bit darker, a little edgier. It's still not magical enough, so maybe we try some like fireflies or something pretty like that. But then I was like, fireflies are kind of corny. I don't know. I know you guys like them, it sounds like, but they're about to leave us. But I think this was such a good starting point. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take away the fireflies, and I'm just going to start detailing and play with colors. So eventually, we got the final product, which is here. So I took away the fireflies because I didn't love the gold, but I thought some white leaves just blowing through, giving it a little bit of depth, made it a little more magical, a little more like a folklore. Having her crown kind of glow, going heavier on the shadows and the highlights. And this is what I will be sending to the client and see if they approve. And if they approve, that's what I'll paint on the wall. Okay, so my big finale here today, and we'll do this after the Q&A, I guess. For those of you who do have a piece of paper, they're labeled A1, it's like Battleship, A1, C3, whatever. Back here, there's a wall over here. There's a grid with the same label that you have. And there's some tape and everything. I think it's pre-taped. But if you have a second, before you leave, just stick up your piece of paper on the corresponding grid, and it will come together and make a giant mural of this. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you all today. I hope I related everything to folklore pretty well. Thank you all for having me.
Test.